I've got just a few things that I think I need to say and needs to be said. One thing is we're building a winning football program at Auburn, and we're on our way. We're not there yet. If people will band together, and either these fence straddlers or get off the fence one way or another, either get all the way in or all the way out so we'll know who we can depend on and get this thing together, we're going places. We're not ready to challenge for the national championship, and we didn't claim to be. But we're going places, and this season's not over. And if we have a good recruiting year this year, I think we'll be able to compete that much better. We need to know who we can depend on. I think that's very important for Auburn people, and I want to make this point that Auburn people can solve any problems that we might have. We don't need to go to the media with it, and we don't need outside folks doing it for us. If we've got some things to straighten out, we can get them straightened out ourselves. And I'm proud that our football team didn't listen to all that external, outside talk and riffraff and from some of the fair weather people. We need to know who the real folks are, and boy, there's a lot of them too, because I heard from them and I talked with them before the game at Starkville.
Sentencing came one day after a Montgomery federal court jury found E.C. Crum-Foshee and his brother Wheeler guilty of mail fraud in connection with a check-kiting scheme used to finance their farming operations at Red Level. Defense attorneys immediately set in motion efforts to have the convictions appealed. The sentence was the same handed down 2 years ago. Crum-Foshee said he was surprised at the verdict. His brother said the sentence did not surprise him.
I was surprised at the verdict. I thought our side put up a good case. I was surprised at some of the stuff that was allowed in and from the other side, and I was surprised at some of the stuff that was not allowed from our side. Of course, y'all understand I'm biased, and I realize that.
Crum-Foshee lost his seat in the state Senate when first convicted, but regained it when the Court of Appeals overturned the district court decision. Wheeler-Foshee says he plans to stay on as deputy prisons commissioner while the case is under appeal.
There's been no decision made at this time, no, sir.
So you'll be...
Yeah, I can help you with that a little bit, too.
Being on the prison board by coincidence. As you know, Mr. Foshee was hired as deputy commissioner by Board of Corrections action. His job status is not civil service. It's not political. It's a matter of board action, and I would imagine that his position would be one that the board would make a determination about, perhaps at its next meeting. December.
How does a family feel in the situation it faces today?
Well, of course, we're disappointed, but we're trying to live life as normally as possible under the circumstances.
Are you prepared to handle the situation at home should the eventual thing transpire there?
Yes, I am. I have a job, and I hope to carry on as well as possible.
From Montgomery Federal Court, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
What was once a haven for rapists and other criminals is now just a lot of cement blocks and 2x4s. Although the site has changed drastically, the problems remain. Approximately 4 months ago, when Isaac Bracey submitted a bid to demolish Jackson Heights, his bid was about $30,000 less than the next highest bidder. During the course of demolishing the site, Bracey says he discovered some unforeseen problems that were not indicated on the original contract. Approximately 2 months ago, Bracey requested the Montgomery Housing Authority to approve a change order. The board denied it. Monday night, Bracey will again go before the board to request a change order. He believes the board will grant the order now because all specifications such as total volume, total unit cost, and total change of condition are indicated. Board member John Knight says he's very concerned that the board puts forth a good faith effort to work with the contractor in this project, which he feels was not done in the past. Knight says as a board member, his only interest is seeing the job completed. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Now, this parade of paper promises certainly seems impressive, and on paper it quite certainly is. But in 1971, the United States Civil Rights Commission, created by that first Civil Rights Act passed in 1957, issued a study which said that the massive array of civil rights laws had protected some basic rights, but that discrimination still flourished and grew. The motion and the movement of the turbulent 1960s has by now made it apparently impossible for most Americans to believe that American black people still sit at the bottom of a long, long ladder. The removal over the decade of the 1960s of the more blatant forms of American apartheid have made it too easy for too many to believe that things have been radically altered for the better. In fact, we are in real danger in 1978 of refighting the battles of the past again and losing them all today.
Well, I've been doing a lot of TV series, you know, like Flying High, you know, with those three stewardesses. I play a priest, you know, and I play with people like Cameron Mitchell and Louis Nye, so it's, you know, it's a lot of fun playing with pros like that. And I just got finished doing a thing with doing a Wonder Woman film, and I just got finished doing a police story where I play a bad guy, you know. Can you picture the Wolfman as a bad guy? Well, I don't know.
You getting into movies as a new line of work?
Well, I've been trying to get. I always wanted to get into movies. You know, I guess it's the ham, way down inside me. Really want to get in, you know, on the screen and act and do things like that. Of course, the best movie I ever did, which I don't think can ever be topped any time, is American Graffiti. You know, it seems every time they release that thing, I mean, it's like a brand new picture all over again. It's amazing. It just blows me away.
We're concerned about the situation over at Auburn University. We specifically want to build a quality athletic program within the athletic department of Auburn University, and that was the purpose this organization was incorporated for. That's to foster the Auburn spirit and to build a quality situation in the athletic department, one that is competitive with other major universities.
Why do you feel, how do you feel the removal of Philpott and Haley as leaders at Auburn, how will that help the athletic program?
Well, you know, the chief executive officer of the institution is the president. The chief executive officer of the department is the athletic director. This is not a question of anybody's integrity. It's a question of leadership, and it's a question of philosophy, a winning philosophy. And we feel like that we need a change of leadership and a change of philosophy. And we feel like to accomplish this, that the leaders in those two areas, there needs to be a change.
Mother and daughter selling a segment of their past. Ruby Folsom Austin and her daughter Cornelia Wallace held a garage sale at the home of Mrs. Austin here in Montgomery. The sister to former Governor Big Jim Folsom and the mother of Governor George Wallace's ex-wife explained why they're having a household sale.
I'm going to move into apartment. And just couldn't, well, I should have had it a long time ago. I'm moving into apartment and I won't have use for all this.
Up for sale were some of the trinkets and bric-a-brac that the two women have collected over the years.
There's a lot of cut glass and a lot of old things that were in my mother's family and things that she collected also over the years. She used to have a collection of these chickens, and from the time I was a little girl, she collected these and had quite a few of them, and just a lot of things that I guess get passed down in families, and things that being a collector like she was, she collected a lot of glassware, and that's mostly what we're disposing of today.
In addition to all of the trinkets up for sale, Mrs. Austin is planning to sell her home of 18 years. While the future of Mrs. Cornelia Wallace is unsure, Mrs. Austin says soon she'll be moving into an apartment here in Montgomery. At 1916 South Hull, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News. Every year, Americans observe Veterans Day, which prior to 1955 was known as Armistice Day. The tradition began in 1918 following the end of World War I, the tradition to recognize those who gave their lives in battle.
It was 60 years ago today that peace was declared, ending World War I. Since that time, this day has been set aside to recognize those who bear the honored designation of veteran. The veterans, their families, and the dependents of deceased veterans make up nearly half the nation's population. Wreaths were laid to honor not only the American veterans, but those of the foreign allies as well. To those, a salute was given.
Hiya. Aim. Hiya. Aim. Hiya.
Ceremonies honoring the veterans were also held at Montgomery's Veterans Administration Hospital. There, Air Force Major Donald P. Orlando re-emphasized the motivating force for the recognition of those who fought in American service.
For 200 years, Americans have supported the military and the people, the veterans like some of you who have made the sacrifices. But the military, as important as it is only an instrument. It's an instrument that you, that all of us, direct to see that America remains free. It's that simple.
Veterans Day, 1978. I'm Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Okay, at present we have 13 counties under the no-burn order. We're not having too many fires at this time. In fact, we only had about 17 fires burning approximately 150 acres yesterday. But we're still evaluating the situation. We can have some lower humidities for a couple of days and some higher winds, and we can be right back into our wildfire emergency type situation.
Are you expecting any rain, or is there any rain forecast?
There's a slight chance for rain about Tuesday. The way the weather forecast has been in the past, all these slight chances have not panned out, and we're not sure what we're looking for.
How about the out-of-town or the out-of-state help? Have you been having a lot of that?
Okay, we've had several crews in other states, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, but all these crews have returned home as of a couple of days ago. However, we do have two 10-man law enforcement teams from various points in the state, our own employees who are out working today.
All right. What can Alabamians look for in the next week or so?
Okay, if we have a return to some of the drier weather with lower humidities and higher winds, we can look for the same type of fire situation we had for the last couple of weeks. We're just hoping we won't have that.
Are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic about the situation?
I'm optimistic at this point.
He was successful mainly, in my view, because of the initiative taken by President Sadat in going to Jerusalem and meeting with President Begin. That was the really historic breakthrough. When I was Under Secretary of State in 1969 and 70, I spent a great deal of my time on the problems of the Middle East. And the more deeply involved we got in Cambodia, the more time I spent on the Middle East. Not because I was trying to avoid Cambodia, but because so many other people were absorbed in that. And in those days, one of the things that we constantly tried to do was to create some process whereby the two sides were negotiating with each other. And at that point, the Arabs were absolutely adamant in refusing to deal directly with the Israelis. And for Sadat to demonstrate the desire for peace that he did demonstrate in going to Israel was a really historic step. And in turn, with the follow-up of that step through direct talks between Egypt and Israel in Jerusalem and Cairo, foundation was then laid for a third party to come in at a relatively advanced stage of their talks and say, in effect, okay, fellas, you really should be able to work out these remaining issues. And
this was not your normal luncheon meeting. Rather, it was the 3rd annual World Championship Hot Dog Eating Contest put on by the Hot Dog King of Millbrook, Bob Harmon. 14 contestants from 3 states entered the contest, each with hopes of breaking the world record of 29 hot dogs, a record set last year by Robert Paxton of Memphis, Tennessee. Paxton was expected to be a contestant again this year, but he never showed up. There was additional incentive besides the world record, a 3-foot trophy and a crisp $100 bill. We had 2 hours in which to consume our lunch. That seemed long enough. But as it turned out for most, a full day would not have been long enough. Even the mid-contest Alka-Seltzer break didn't seem to help any. As was expected, there were some casualties. No fewer than 3 of the contestants left the table rapidly, their hands cupped over their mouths. Others dropped out before reaching that stage. But special medals should have been given for the handful of guys still around at the end of 2 hours. The winner was a Montgomery man, 41-year-old John Ford. He was last year's runner-up. Through 2 hours of calm, steady eating, Ford managed to swallow 23 and a half hot dogs. Capturing second place and $25 was Mike Kalish of Millbrook, and in third place, winning $15, was John Thetford, who came all the way from Chattanooga, Tennessee, just for the contest. As for yours truly, well, he didn't get sick, but he did finish in dead last with a somewhat embarrassing total of 9. Better luck next year, only as a spectator. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, Millbrook.
For the last 14 years, the 2nd Congressional District of the state has been represented by a Republican, Bill Dickinson. Dickinson is currently the ranking Republican on the House Armed Services Committee, as well as the ranking Republican on the House Administration Committee. Like other Republicans, he is opposed to increased government control and supports revenue sharing and other means as a way to return government control to the states and local communities. And Dickinson says he's optimistic that this next Congress will be able to do more about big government spending.
If you will recall, when I was first elected to the Congress, LBJ was president, the Great Society. The answer for every problem was just to throw money at it, and we threw money at every problem, and we had a debacle. It was very unsatisfactory. It didn't work. Since then, we've had a succession of presidents with Nixon and Ford and now Carter. But I think now that the American people are just fed up with taxes. You know, we work from 1 January, the average working man, from 1 January until the 1st of June for the government. They take 40% of the average working man's pay for taxes, all state at all levels. I think that this Proposition 13 has waked up a lot of people, and I've seen conservatives in this past Congress start voting more conservative. I think we're going to see more conservatives return to the Congress this time. And so for the first time in 14 years, I feel like that I'm not a voice crying in the wilderness, that I'm more in the mainstream than I've ever been. And I'm optimistic for the first time because the people are fed up with taxes, big government, government interference, and they are making themselves heard, and they're making themselves heard at the ballot box. And I think I'm going to have a lot more help in this coming term than I've ever had since I've been there.
Incumbent Dickinson faces opposition again this election year from the state Democratic Party. With more on Dickinson's opponent, State Senator Wendell Mitchell, here's Glenda Webb.
Wendell Mitchell of Luverne handily won the Democratic nomination for the 2nd District congressional seat, beating 2 opponents without a runoff. Name recognition was a big factor in that win. Mitchell became well known in past campaigns as Walking Wendell, an identification he's played up in this race for Dickinson's seat. This is Mitchell's 2nd bid for Congress. In 1972, he lost his race in the Democratic runoff. In 1974, he was elected to the state Senate. Prior to that, he was chief assistant to the late Senator James Allen. Mitchell is banking on his experience and reputation as a state legislator to win this election. Mitchell says he'll be a conservative voice speaking for the 2nd District and working to cut government spending.
I shall push hard for the sunset concept, the zero-based budgeting concept, the auditing of government accounts, the restrictions on congressional travel, restrictions on congressional allowances, and in general, more accountability on the part of those who hold public office. I will actively support the balancing of the federal budget, and I will favor an immediate reduction in spending and elimination of unneeded programs. My general philosophy will be that the government which governs least governs best, and that the office which I shall assume is that of the people and not the person who temporarily holds that office as the choice of the people.
Mitchell also says he'll work for a strong national defense and promote the free enterprise system. Borrowing from the campaign theme of Democratic gubernatorial nominee Fob James, Mitchell says it's time for a new beginning in Washington. Glenda Webb, WSFA TV News.
The Republican candidate for the unexpired 2nd U.S. Senate seat left vacant by the death of Jim Allen is a Tarrant City native. 60-year-old Jim Martin now lives in Gadsden, where he runs a chain of service stations and is president of Martin Oil Company. This is not Martin's first political race. In 1962, Martin barely lost a race for a U.S. House seat to Lister Hill. In '64, during the Goldwater Republican presidential bid, Martin unseated Hill for that House seat. In '66, he left Congress to be defeated by Lurleen Wallace in a gubernatorial race. His last race was 6 years ago when he lost a U.S. Senate race to Winton Red Blunt. This year, Martin's Republican race is marked with one major difference. He's being supported by a number of Democrats who are spinoffs from the Jim Allen ranks. Prior to his death this week, Marion Allen's brother, Jim Pittman, headed up the Democratic support for Martin. Martin's campaign is centered around the Jim Allen theme of conservatism. When Martin decided to enter a race this year, he chose to do battle with Howell Heflin, but later says he concluded that Heflin was also a conservative, while Donald Stewart was not.
Made the decision to run for the United States Senate. I made it on the basis of giving Alabama a conservative voice in line with that of my friend and longtime friend, Senator Jim Allen, who was my neighbor for 30 years. Now that Mrs. Allen had been defeated in the race that she sought, I looked at the races between Mr. Heflin and Mr. Stewart and came to the firm conclusion that if I am to best represent the interest of all Alabamians, I need to run against Mr. Stewart and defeat him in the polls.
Martin has also used this race to release his displeasures with President Carter's policies, blasting the President administration's tax cuts, the relaxed beef import regulations, and national defense policy. But top on Martin's list of goals is passage of the Kemp-Roth 33% tax cut bill, which has been heavily supported by Republicans throughout all the races. While Martin claims that his opponent is being sponsored by large Eastern labor unions, Stewart alleges that Martin will only be able to reflect large business interest in his actions in Congress. And Janet May has more on that.
Democrat Donald Stewart of Anniston says his views represent the majority of Alabamians instead of just the business sector. To prove his claim, he's asking voters to look at his record in the Alabama legislature. During the past 8 years in Montgomery, Stewart fought against higher interest rates, increased utility rates, and wasteful government spending. Stewart says what makes him different is not just that he fights special interests, it's that he's beaten them. His opponent has repeatedly called him a liberal Democrat who will misrepresent Southern ideas. But Stewart says by comparison, his record proves he will do a better job.
They ought to take a look at his record in Congress, his public record, and I think that's
there for folks to take a look at, just like mine is. But I've fought some good fights in the legislature to keep interest rates down, to keep utility rates down, to improve the health care system, to improve our educational system. That's what I'd ask them to take a look at. Plus, I've represented all the people in what I hope was a fair and equitable manner, not just a special privileged few. I think they reflected that in the vote on September the 26th, when about 503,000 folks said that they thought I ought to be the nominee for the Democratic Party to go to the United States Senate.
In the runoff election, Stewart received 57% of the vote against Senator Marion Allen. This week, the 38-year-old lawyer picked up the endorsement of Louisiana Senator Russell Long, who urged Alabamians to vote for the candidate who will have the most influence in Washington. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Many of the members of the state Democratic Party ticket were in Montgomery tonight for a rally for gubernatorial nominee Fob James. Along with the statewide candidates were some hopefuls in the local races. Many one-time candidates in this year's Democratic primary were also in attendance as an example of a unified party. One of the nominees for the Democratic Party this year is Charlie Graddick. He's received the nomination for State Attorney General, but since he has no opposition in the general election, his position is assured. Like the heads of other state departments, Graddick will have to go before the legislature for his budget. Recently, a newspaper article was written in which it was indicated that Graddick would be keeping files on the members of the legislature. Graddick says the incident is a misunderstanding about his efforts to get to know the new legislature better.
I never said I was going to keep any files, and it, I guess, was an attempt to infer that I was going to be some sort of super CIA agent, but it's not true. I've talked to Lieutenant Governor McMillan, and I'm just real excited about the cooperation and unity that we're all going to have, and the new legislators that are coming to Montgomery have nothing to worry about Charlie Graddick keeping files on.
Part of the evening's celebration by the Democrats was the appearance of a living version of the National Democrat symbol of a donkey. There was one problem. The little critter was a mule and not a donkey. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery Civic Center.
Republican Virginia Nell Walser of Marion says for the past 8 years, the state Senate has been dominated by ambitious politicians running for governor. Mrs. Walser has accused her Democrat opponent George McMillan of Birmingham of attempting to establish a power structure in the Senate from which to launch a campaign for governor in 4 years.
The office of Lieutenant Governor is too important and plays too vital a role in the operation of our state to let this power struggle start all over again. I strongly suggest to you to ask Guy Hunt, the Republican candidate for governor, and Fob James, the Democrat candidate for governor, if either of them can function in the governor's chair with such a power structure in the state Senate. I say no.
Certainly I'm not at work to set up any power structure. What I'm at work to do is to help structure an Alabama Senate that can work for the people of this state. My goal in seeking the office of Lieutenant Governor is to help restore some dignity, respect, and integrity to the Alabama legislature, and I certainly would not be living up to what the people of this state expect of me if I were not already working toward that goal.
Okay, what about your plans for governor? I know it's a little early for that, but this has also been charged.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is amusing to me. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. I want to do the best job I can as Lieutenant Governor. As Lieutenant Governor, I want to work in such a way as to help our governor to be the best governor that this state has ever had. And that's the only goal that I have. And as I say, I really find this kind of political maneuvering amusing.
What about committee chairman appointments? McMillan says they should remain in the hands of the Lieutenant Governor.
I think that the preferable process is the one that we have used in the past, in which the Lieutenant Governor appoints the committee chairman, because to me, the Lieutenant Governor of this state has a very important responsibility, and that is to make the legislative process work. And that is what I have asked the people of this state to allow me the opportunity to do, and I plan, when I have the opportunity to appoint committee chairman, to appoint people whom I feel share my dedication to a democratic process and to running committees in such a way that any citizen of this state could receive on any bill a fair, thorough, comprehensive hearing.
When I am elected Lieutenant Governor, I will ask each senator to provide me with a resume of their qualifications, their experience, and the preference of committee assignments. I will then appoint these committees according to their qualification, their preference, making sure that we get a geographical balance so that all areas of this state is represented.
Mrs. Walser says her experience in government qualifies her for the office of Lieutenant Governor. That experience includes 4 years as public relations officer for the state of Arkansas. She now operates and owns a soybean farm in Dallas County. McMillan, born October 11, 1943 in Greenville, Alabama, was first elected to the legislature in 1973. The Auburn University graduate and Democratic nominee says he will preside impartially over the Senate. He describes himself as a fiscal conservative in budgetary matters. McMillan says he will limit debate to issues that are germane to the legislation before the Senate. McMillan wants the Senate to work a full day and will seek to abolish a 5 p.m. quitting rule now in effect in the upper chamber. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Real estate in major cities. It's said the church itself is unaware of the total value of its holdings. But despite the richness of its possessions, the Vatican, like other countries these days, faces cash problems. Vatican income is $40 million a year, but last year the church spent much more than that and ran a $35 million deficit. This year the church has been faced with the expense of 2 papal funerals and 2 papal elections. Estimates put the cost of those events alone at $8 million, though a church spokesman says the figure is not nearly that high. Much of the Vatican deficit is due to higher employee wages. From the broadcasters at Vatican Radio to the men who cut the Vatican grass, worker salaries have risen about 21% in 3 years. The employees here get perks like lower prices at the Vatican gas pumps and at the Vatican grocery store. But now, in order to save money, it's been announced that prices are going to have to go up on some things. To help with the cost of the conclave, there will be the traditional sales of commemorative medals and special issue coins. Sales of the vacant see Vatican stamps have been brisk since they began yesterday. The church may be rich in worldly possessions, but there's not enough in its worldly cash drawers to make ends meet.
No one is suggesting that the church is about to go broke, but one of the problems the new pope is going to face isn't a spiritual one, but a